Welcome back. This upcoming Tuesday, President Trump is expected to deliver his second address before the United Nations. Topping the agenda will likely be denuclearization talks with North Korea, rising tensions with Iran, global trade, and his America First view of foreign policy. For a preview of what we could expect in this exclusive interview right now, National Security Advisor John Bolton. Ambassador, great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be back.
What should we expect from the president this week?
Well, I think he's got a couple major possibilities really to help illuminate for the American people what America's place in the world is. His General Assembly speech on Tuesday that you mentioned will talk a lot about American sovereignty, how that fits into America's place in the world as a whole. In addition, there's a Security Council meeting on Wednesday where he'll talk about his non-proliferation policies dealing with the nuclear threats of North Korea and Iran. Very important to show how different his handling of those is because of the different circumstances. And we've got major issues with two of the world's other powers, China on trade and on broader issues of geostrategic conflict, and Russia, where we're confronting in a number of different areas. So I think the president will have a chance to show how full the international agenda is and how active he has been in each of these different areas.
Has China pushed back in any way since the president started pushing and poking China the way he has? Because we know that China has been stealing intellectual property for decades and they won't admit it. Have they changed their behavior in any way?
Well, I think they're still trying to figure out what the president's up to, although there's no doubt in some of the tariffs that they've imposed, they've targeted the president's supporters in Congress to see if they can change the majority. I think a lot of people don't understand exactly what's at stake here, and I think the president will address this. This is not just an economic issue. This is not just talking about tariffs in the terms of trade. This is a question of power. The intellectual property theft that you mentioned has a major impact on China's economic capacity and therefore on its military capacity. And I think the president correctly understands when China gets economic power by stealing from the United States and others, it's time to call a stop to it.
And then they are applying that economic power toward their military complex by creating these islands in the South China Sea and dominating them and then setting up military bases there. Is that right?
Right, exactly. China, you know, they talk in the Middle East about creating facts on the ground in the Israel-Palestinian issue. China is creating the ground in the South China Sea and putting more facts on top of it. It's very dangerous, very aggressive, something that the administration has confronted. And I think all of this goes to what will be the major theme of the 21st century, which is how China and the United States get along.
Yeah. Take us behind the scenes in that room in the UN General Assembly, because you've got players like Syria, Russia, and there have been developments there in the news. What is most important that the American people need to focus on as we watch all of these players interact this upcoming week?
Well, I think it shows how complex the international environment is. Let's take the case of Syria, where just in the past few days, the Syrians shot down a Russian airplane, killing 15 Russians. Their allies, Syria and Russia. Russia has two bases, military bases in Syria. This happened because of an Israeli airstrike against Iranians who are trying to equip the Hezbollah terrorists with ballistic missile capabilities. So here's something that shows the continuing threat of Iran, not just on the nuclear side, but in aggressive militaristic behavior in the region that puts us at risk of this kind of conflict.
What happens next with Iran? I mean, how do you see that relationship changing?
Well, the president's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal has had a profound effect on Iran and the region as a whole. And with even stronger sanctions coming back in November, we think we've disrupted their efforts to impose their will in countries around the region. We think these new sanctions coming in will have a significant economic and political effect inside the country. And that's what we want. We want massive changes in behavior by the regime in Iran. And if they don't undertake that, they'll face more consequences because we'll find more sanctions to impose and other ways to put maximum pressure on them.
So more consequences for Iran. You think then we will see further sanctions if they do not comply?
Absolutely, no doubt about it.
What about Syria? Will there be a response in terms of the U.S. and Syria?
Well, you know, the president was very clear. He expects that Syria is not going to engage in a brutal invasion of Idlib province. We've commented that if Syria uses chemical weapons again in Idlib or anywhere else, they will face a third response militarily from the United States, and it will not be small because we want to make it clear that we expect this is never going to happen again. So the Middle East remains extremely volatile. Our friend Israel is in danger from Iran. Our friends in the oil-producing monarchies monarchies of the Arabian Peninsula are at risk from Iran. And the kind of economic and political instability that Iran is causing in that region and around the world is unacceptable.
And then there's the Qataris, who, of course, are friendly or partners with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah, we've made it very clear. We think all this support for terrorism should stop. You know, the president's first overseas trip was in Riyadh, where he created the anti-terror coalition. All the countries that attended, including Qatar, promised to give up their support for terrorism. The Qataris need to make that come true.
As National Security Advisor, I wonder your thoughts on this whole cabal in the intelligence community and what we're dealing with in terms of the investigation into Trump-Russia collusion that is non-existent 2 years later.
Well, you know, the president gets criticized for being soft on Russia. I'm still waiting to see evidence of that. You know, he has authorized us to take very strong action against election meddling by anybody, strong action against intrusions into our information technology systems by countries like Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. Just last week, he signed a new directive that reverses the Obama administration policy of not encouraging offensive cyber operations by the United States. This is a major change in the way we're doing business, and our adversaries need to know that.
This is what I want to talk to you about.